Hi everybody, Eric from Hit Subscribe here, and today I'd like to talk to you about keyword or search term difficulty. And what this means is when you're typing something into Google or the search engine of your choice, I'm going to call that a keyword or a search term. And so the question is, for any given one of those keywords or search terms, how hard would it be to write a blog post or a piece of content that would rank in the search engine? So that can range anywhere from really easy if it's a very obscure term, to very difficult if everybody in the world is trying to rank for it. So that's what today's video is about. I'm going to give you kind of a specific set of heuristics. When you're done watching, you will have a bunch of questions that you can ask yourself that will help you evaluate whether a search term will be easy or hard for you to rank for on your blog or your website. All right, now I do have a couple of caveats before we get going here in earnest. The first one is that I need to talk about something called domain authority. And the reason I need to talk about domain authority is that not all sites play on a level playing field when it comes to ranking for a given term in search. And I think probably the easiest way for me to explain this is to get away from abstract definitions of domain authority and talk instead about a couple of hypothetical sites. Well, one's not hypothetical. One is, let's say, Wikipedia, and the other one is cheapoverseasdrugs.com, which you just set up 10 minutes ago and are trying to write blog posts on. Now, if you and Wikipedia literally were to write the exact same article, the search engines would trust Wikipedia. They would look at that article and say, okay, I can probably rank this. If it's your spammy, new, shady-sounding site, and you write that same post, the search engines will probably ignore you. So the idea here is that domain authority is a measure of how much the search engines already trust a given site. A very well-established site with tons of links coming into it, like Wikipedia, or like Microsoft or Amazon, those sites are going to tend to have a lot of domain authority, and they're going to rank for things easily. New sites, like for those of you watching who are trying to start a blog and maybe gain some search traffic, you're going to fall probably not quite as onto the extreme as that spammy site, but you're going to fall more on the end of that spectrum. And if you're watching and you're a content marketer from a dev tools company, you're probably kind of in the middle of the road, as is my own site, Dead Tech, for instance, where you do all right ranking. But there are sites out there that will do better, and there are sites that will do worse. Now, an interesting thing is that when we're talking about difficulty, and when we're talking about tools that evaluate the difficulty for ranking, they basically assume kind of a middle-of-the-road domain authority. So they will say that some things are easy to rank for and some are hard. If you are just starting out, everything might be hard. So bear in mind that when we're talking about this, we're kind of assuming a median level of domain authority. So that's caveat number one. Caveat number two. There are tools out there that will tell you difficulty, so you might wonder why I'm going into this at all. And I did allude to this in a video that prompted this one, where somebody asked for more information about this. But you can go out there and you can get tools either for free or for pay that will give you readings on keyword difficulty. But let me show you something here, and this is the reason that I tend not to put ultimate stock in them. So what I'm bringing up on the screen is this search called DevOps Trends. It does 210 searches per month, and maybe I want to write about DevOps trends to see if that's something that I'm going to be able to rank for. Well, what I have in these other 4 tabs are 4 tools that are telling me about the difficulty of ranking for DevOps trends. Here is one, Keyword Keg, that I use to look at the volume of keywords. And Keyword Keg is telling me that this is a pretty difficult search. If I go over here to Ahrefs is telling me that DevOps Trends is like the easiest search imaginable. Now, if I go over to Moz, this really isn't giving us anything other than a number, but from having used Moz a lot, I can tell you that this is somewhere at the boundary between pretty easy and kind of medium. So moderately easy is what Moz is telling us. And finally, this guy, Key Search, is telling us 32. I'm not as familiar with this tool, but this green seems to indicate that it's easy-ish. So we've got a vote for hard, a vote for really easy, a vote for moderately easy, and a vote for easy-ish, I guess. Now you might do a poll here and call Keyword Keg the odd tool out. But I can tell you over the course of time, this is not an anomaly. These tools are using sort of different metrics to build their composites, and sometimes they agree and sometimes they do not. So this is the reason that I have kind of moved away from relying whole cloth on any given keyword tool. So to kind of summarize, you could pick one of these and go with it and rely on it. And probably a lot of times it's going to be fairly accurate, but they are not the be all and end all. And they might actually confuse you if you're looking at more than one of them. Okay, so caveats out of the way. Here's something to bear in mind. One term I'm going to be using a lot is SERP, S-E-R-P. That stands for Search Engine Results Page. And going over here, opening a new tab, this is what a search is. If I type in that same DevOps trends, the SERP is this whole page and only the front page, because nobody cares about what happens here on page 2. Just almost nobody ever clicks there. So a SERP is specifically this front page of a search where you search for a keyword or a search term. Okay, now I am going to give you a kind of bullet list, if you will, of questions to ask yourself. So let me explain how the rest of this video here is going to work. I'm going to give you a series of heuristics because this isn't easy. It's kind of a feel thing that you get to know over the course of time. But I'm going to frame all these heuristic questions in a way such that if the answer is yes, then you can check one more box next to signs point to easy. So if I tell you about all these things that I'm going to go through and you ask yourself all of these questions and the answer to all of them is yes, you can take it to the bank that this is going to be an easy term to rank for. Likewise, if the answer to all of them is no, it's probably going to be really hard. If the answer to half of them is yes, then maybe you assume a medium difficulty. And I kind of do this mentally as I evaluate keywords. And bear in mind that you will have to practice this and get used to it. I kind of do it with an ease and fluidity. It's become sort of subconscious, but it will take some getting used to. So just kind of, maybe practice one or two of them at a time and expand your repertoire as you go. All right, now let's actually dive in and get started with the heuristics. So the first up, I'm going to make myself a hypocrite and say go right back to these tools. If you have one or more of them at your disposal and you want to use them, do a search with them. And if they all seem to line up, then, more power to you. Like if you go and do DevOps, I feel pretty confident all of these tools are going to tell us that DevOps is a hard keyword. So let's redo our search here with each of them and see what we see for the keyword DevOps. Oops. Sometimes if you use them too much for free, they start to do nonsense like that to you. So, super hard. What does Moz think? Moz says this is pretty hard. That red here seems to indicate that this is hard. And when this guy finishes, it is also going to tell us that DevOps is a hard search term. So if these tools are all telling you the same thing, that is a pretty good indicator that they're right. So the first question you want to ask yourself is, do the keyword tools I have at my disposal tell me that this is easy? If as many of them as you have kind of agree and they're telling you it's easy, that's a good sign. All right, question 2. Do you see big names and heavy hitters in the SERP? And we're going to be talking here about sites with high domain authority is what that means. So you'll know this better for your own vertical than I will when it comes to software trends and DevOps and IT and all this type of stuff. I know this space very well. If you're out there trying to do a candle making blog, I do not know who the big candle making players are, but you will, probably know these names and recognize them. So let's take a look here. And just full disclosure, I have not done this search in terms of this particular heuristic. So I am looking here at DevOps, and I see aws.amazon.com, sort of a big name, Wikipedia, devops.com, Atlassian, who is a big player in the industry, Red Hat, Webipedia, opensource.com, and Medium. These are all pretty serious players with pretty high domain authority. So this indicates that it's going to be hard to rank. So question number 2 is the inverse of that. Am I seeing kind of a lot of no-name blogs or things that I've never heard of, or even, things that seem really off the beaten path, like the aforementioned what did I say, cheap overseas drugs. If you see things like that in the SERP, there's a pretty good chance it will be an easy SERP. All right, thing number 3. Are the articles in the SERP short and lacking for information? So let's do a search that just probably wouldn't yield a whole lot of stuff. DevOps is silly. All right, why everyone hates DevOps. DevOps rants. So if I start to look through this, if I'm evaluating this particular term for difficulty in ranking, we're going to look at a few things, like actually to circle back to the previous point. We've got Lion Face. This is not a big name. I doubt this is a high domain authority site. So if I'm trying to rank for DevOps as silly, that's a good sign. But let's take a look at the actual content here. Now, this is a fairly meaty piece of content, but it's a rant. There's no subheadings, there's no graphics. This is not a particularly good blog post as far as organic search is concerned. And it's not a knock on the guy. Perhaps the content itself is really compelling, but this is not somebody who's optimizing their blog for search. So if I'm looking at this, this is kind of a periodical. Again, there's a fair bit of content here, but not a ton. No graphics, no particularly compelling features in there that seem to indicate a lot of research or effort went into trying to rank here, and that's a good thing. So this is a really short piece of content. 3 major ways Agile is different. So this is also not really even on topic. We'll get to that a little later. But this is a short piece of content. So I would expect DevOps is silly, which is not a widely held opinion per se. It's kind of a contrarian opinion, does no search volume. So this is probably an easy search term, and it seems to be backed up by the entries here not having a lot of meat to them. So this is entry number 1, and it's got a bunch of outbound links, and it's maybe only like 500 pages. So this is what you're looking for in a search if it's going to be easy to rank for, that the content that's up here is not particularly search optimized or well done, or, I mean, like, it could be that it's bad content, or it could just not be very long or detailed and maybe not answering the search question or the search concept. So that is thing number 3. Are you kind of seeing short, not super informational articles in the SERP? That's a good sign that it will be relatively easy to rank for. Okay, thing number 4. Do the search results on the SERP lack information about the term that you're searching for? Now, I'm going to leave it right here on this DevOps is silly. This is an admittedly cartoonish example, but it illustrates this point as well. The keyword here is DevOps is silly, and so if somebody is actually searching for this, it probably indicates that they're searching, they're kind of asking the question, is DevOps silly? And what you'll notice is this isn't being directly answered in the SERP. So we have why everyone hates DevOps, DevOps rant. You may not know it, but you've already arrived at DevOps land. DevOps is dead, the obligatory one of those. DevOps is yikes. My definition of DevOps, but none of these says DevOps is silly. It's not using those terms together. And while Google and other search engines are now sophisticated enough to do kind of a matching, like you can't, the way you might have in years past been able to swap in a synonym for something popular and rank for that. It used to be a lot more literal. There is now synonym matching. So if you're Googling DevOps is silly, it may show you DevOps is stupid. It's not that literal or obtuse anymore. Nevertheless, what we see here halfway down the SERP is my definition of DevOps. We do see DevOps silly kind of here at the bottom, which is interesting in and of itself. But the big thing to look for here is that what you're not seeing is a lot of clear addressing of this search term, versus if we go back to DevOps trends, we're going to see a much different story in the hard to rank for arena, or at least moderately hard to rank for. 8 DevOps trends to be aware of. DevOps trends, DevOps trends, DevOps trends. So you can see the contrast here, and that frames it, in this particular part of the heuristic, what you're looking for. Are we kind of missing any clear sense that the SERP results are addressing what we're searching for? If they seem to be missing that, then there's a good bet you can rank for that keyword. All right, next up, do you see Q&A sites or stock definition sites like Investopedia or Techopedia in the search results. If the answer to that is yes, that is a good sign this is something easy to search for. And let me explain why. All right, what I'm going to do here is type in best Java logging framework for a new project. Now imagine that I'm searching for this. I am clearly asking a question. What is the best Java logging framework if I'm starting on a new project? And what do I see here? Well, right at the top, I see Quora, and Quora is a Q&A site. So if I open this up, I have this question: what is the best logging framework for Java new projects? And I see what Sep, I'm not sure how to say his name. See what this guy says. There's a lot of stuff. Here's Rachel weighing in with just go look it up. Thanks, Rachel. That's super helpful. I would say log4j. So this is kind of illustrating my point, and that's actually not the worst. You could usually in a Q&A site like that expect somebody to say, hey, Java is stupid. You should really be using Ruby, because that's what happens in Q&A frameworks. They're kind of garbage for answering questions. I mean, on the one hand, they're kind of designed for that, but the problem is that there's a huge signal to noise problem there. So you might get like a legitimately good answer, like that first answer, Saptarshi. This is a pretty detailed answer. He should probably do that on his blog instead of a Q&A site. But then you get this. Just go look it up. Thanks. So it's really varied in the response quality that you're going to get. And you deal with trolls and weirdos and, people that miss the point. Whereas if I go back here and I scroll down and I see that Stackify is comparing, a series of logging frameworks, this is going to be inherently more compelling to me because I know for sure that I'm getting what they say I'm going to get in the title of this article. Now, the trouble here with this Stackify post for my particular search is that this is just a stock comparison of these three frameworks. So it's not actually answering my search question, which is what is the best Java logging framework for a new project. If I scroll down, I also don't see that anyone's really answering that. So what Google is doing is it's saying, this question is being asked verbatim only on this Q&A site. This is really the only place is on Quora that we seem to be directly addressing the search question. So what Google does is they bump it up to the top. But if you went in here and you wrote a blog post that took a look at definitively the best Java logging framework for a new project, you would most likely rank, even without a ton of domain authority, because searchers will 99 times out of 100 choose a very detailed blog post over picking their way through a bunch of answers and seeing what kind of stuff Steve090215 has to say about it. They would much rather read a dedicated piece of content that addresses their query. 99 out of 100 is probably high. I'm not going to lie, I made that up. I don't know what it is, but there are studies on this. Like, it's a known thing that if you're seeing Q&A sites in the SERP, that's a good SERP to rank for. So that's a good way to close that out and to explain why. Look for Q&A sites in the SERP. That is a great sign that this will be an easy keyword to rank for. Okay, now I'm going to go over the next item, which is kind of an interesting one. And the thing to ask yourself is, does this SERP seem to have entries that answer different search questions? And here's what I mean by that. The longer the search term that you type into Google, the more specific a thing you're looking for. And the shorter, the more general it is. So if I just type in logging, this is a great example because before I'm looking for the best Java logging framework to use on a new project, incredibly specific. If I just abbreviate that to logging, well, as you can see, we might be looking for, logging in the cutting down trees sense, or we may be looking for logging for Python. And if you keep going through this SERP, you're going to find probably logging for other programming languages and so on and so forth. This is a broader search term. Now, the reason I'm explaining all this is because philosophically, anytime anyone types something into a search engine, they're asking a question, even if they don't phrase it in the form of a question. Now, with that last search, best Java logging framework for a new project, it's pretty clear what I'm asking. But in this one where I just abbreviated to logging, I could actually be asking the same thing and just, kind of really not being good at searching. Like maybe I'm typing in logging because that is my question, and I just assume I'll get results about Java logging frameworks and new projects. But that's the trouble here. Logging is so general that it could be, and in fact does, cover any number of searcher questions. So you might be asking, what is the logging industry? What is logging in software? Both of those searches might be served by this broad term. So that explained, an important thing to understand is that what you're trying to do when you're trying to rank for a term is you're really wanting to match search intent. So I actually wouldn't recommend writing a blog post or anything titled logging, because if you are trying to capture loggers and lumberjacks, then you're going to get all this traffic that relates to logging in software. And likewise, if you're trying to blog about logging in software, you're going to get some lumberjacks. So you want to get more specific than this. So if you were to make this into software logging, that's a better search. Now, how does all of this relate to search difficulty? Well, if what you find when you're typing in a search term is that the search results seem to serve different questions, that is a sign that you're going to have an easier time ranking for the search. So, for instance, let's take software logging. We see here an entry for the log file. We see an entry for best log management software, and introduction to logging for programmers, programming practices, and so on and so forth. So, what you're seeing here in this SERP is that Google isn't quite sure what people are trying to do when they type in software logging, and all else being equal, that's actually a pretty good sign. Now, looking at the terms and who is playing here, I don't think this particular search would actually be an easy one, but if you set everything else aside, this is a good sign for this search, which is that Google really hasn't found a definitive answer to what searchers are looking for, so it's kind of offering them a buffet. And in general, when you see that in combination with other of the checklist factors we're talking about here, that's a good thing. So if Google seems indecisive about what searchers are actually desiring in a SERP, that's a good sign that you might have an easy time ranking. Okay, next up, we're going to get a little bit into something that you might want or need a tool for. So if I go back to this tool that I have, Ahrefs, this is a cool thing that I can scroll down and take a look at, which is SERP position history. So it's actually showing you who has ranked for what over the course of the last 6 months, I believe it is. Now, different SEO tools will have features like this. I can't speak for sure to all of them that do. Ahrefs is a great tool. I will throw a link to it below in the notes. I think you got to pay to try it out, but I'm not sure. If you want to try it, I do recommend it. But whatever tool you have, if you can get your hands on the SERP history, that's a helpful thing to look at. And it could be as simple as if you really want to rank for DevOps trends, you just manually once every few weeks or so, you go and make a note of what's ranking here. If you know of a way to capture this information using some kind of Wayback Machine or something, I don't, but please weigh in the comments because I would love to know that. But anyway, however you do it, keeping track of the rankings in a SERP over the course of time is helpful information. And the reason for that is if you see volatility in the rankings, that is a good sign. That means that Google doesn't quite know, or whatever search engine you're using, the search engine doesn't quite know which is going to serve the searchers the best, and it's still looking for things to kind of pop up there and try out and see if they like it. So if you see it moving terms around, that means you've got a good opportunity there. That's a sign that you might have an easy search on your hands. If, on the other hand, you go back and we take a look at what Ahrefs was saying about DevOps, that's not any volatility. It's the same big players there forever. If you see that, stay away. That's a hard search. So look for that volatility. That's a good sign. Next up, let's talk about something called SERP features, and let's return to some of our DevOps stuff here. Now, you'll notice that if we do software logging, Google gets right to the point. So as I scroll down here, there's not a lot going on except links I can click on. DevOps trends, on the other hand, we got this graph, all this stuff. Then there's this tech beacon thing. And so like I have to scroll down below the fold to even see a result. And then there's more of this like related tools. All of this type of thing, when Google sticks videos in here, when it sticks these cards, these featured snippets, these definitions, what it's trying to do is enhance searchers' experience by trying to answer their questions without them even needing to leave the page. It's saying, hey, we think we've got some information that's interesting to you. That is awesome for you if you are a searcher. If you are someone who is writing blog posts and trying to rank, I refer to this as SERP garbage. Unless you're the one being featured, that's good for your site. But if other people are being featured, that's no good. Now, in part, it's no good because it takes up some of the real estate, so you have less opportunities to get in there. But in terms of difficulty, it's not a complete hand-in-hand relationship, but it's also not orthogonal. So the SERP features relate to difficulty. And the way they relate is if you start to see a lot of SERP features, there's a pretty good chance this will be a disproportionately difficult search. Whereas if you see kind of nothing but, so you got videos here in terms of DevOps. Google has some stuff here that they want you to check out. Whereas this software logging, maybe we've got another indication that this actually won't be too bad of a search, because all you've really got here is this people also ask, and then these related search software things buried at the bottom. So that is a good one. If we go back to our best Java logging blah, this is almost certainly going to have minimal search features. Yeah, SERP features really doesn't. It does have the people also ask. People also ask is common for long tail searches because they think you maybe mess something up and they're like, hey, is this maybe what you're looking for? I shouldn't actually phrase it that way. I think it's less that they think you might have messed up your search and more they're saying you might be being a little too specific for the results that we have. Why don't you try one of these other things instead? So long and short of it, if you see few or no SERP features, that's a good sign that this is not going to be a terribly hard search. All right, last up, this will be another one that you would probably want to have a keyword tool for. Ahrefs does this, a lot of them will do this. But the big question is, do these pages in the SERP have a lot of backlinks? Again, weigh in the comments if you know how to figure that out without the use of an SEO tool. Maybe you could do kind of a fancy advanced search in the search engine to see who's linking. But the idea is you want to try, if you can, to get a feel for how many inbound links these things have. And I won't belabor the point here too much, but the idea is with inbound links that builds something called link equity, and it's a big factor in your domain authority and in what's called page authority, which is how authoritative this particular search engine entry might be for this given search. And the internet generally confers link authority on different sites by adding a link. When you add a link to a site, you're kind of telling the world, hey, I think this site has good information. So the point is, if you have entries in the SERP that have lots and lots of inbound links, it's going to be hard to displace those. If, on the other hand, you have a SERP where nobody's linking to these things, there's nobody out there indicating they trust them, so that's going to be a good opportunity for you to rank. So that's all I've got in terms of the heuristics that I kind of mentally keep track of as I go. I do use Ahrefs for helping me with a lot of this information, but frankly, more than anything for determining difficulty, I'm just looking at the SERPs, and I've developed a feel for all this stuff kind of as I go. And if you practice it enough, you will as well. So that's it for today. I appreciate you tuning in and listening. And if you liked this, feel free to give it a like. And if you want to see more content like this, we would love a subscribe from you. Click that bell at the bottom too if you want to be notified about all the videos. And that's all I got for you. I will check back in the future. And if you want to see any particular topics when it comes to blog content planning, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of meander around writing or doing videos about whatever it is I feel like. So thanks, and I will catch you next time.